Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mafia Championship podcast. I'm your host, Thingaman, and this is the podcast where we talk about the Mafia Championship, the championship of all championships, the battle of all battles, the war of all wars between fellow Mafia enthusiasts. It's a lovely thing to see, and we're almost nearing the end of the qualifier stage. We only have one game remaining, Game 11, which I believe is at Final 4 right now. So almost at the end, and then it's time for the jury to pick their semifinal picks, and then it's still game on from there. It's very exciting. This is already the 9th episode of the podcast. I'm very happy to see you all tuning in every week. It's a lot of fun. Thanks a lot for being here for what is sure to be another great podcast, because we have some good guests for this one. Some very hype guests for this one. Today we will be talking about Game 8, the only game in the history of the Mafia Championship to unfortunately be cancelled. It's a shame, but I guess we'll look on the bright side, which is the first time it's happened. Another bright side is that from what I could gather, the players really had a fun time, and I've been hearing that there are plans for a reunion game. And that is truly the goal of these games, which is to bring communities and people together. So if that's been accomplished, I'm happy, and we can make the best of a not optimal situation. For those who didn't follow along, what happened in Game 8 was that a member from a band community posed as a member from a real-life community. Proper vetting wasn't unfortunately done in this case, and we will be improving vetting for future seasons. It's a lot to... we will be improving the standard and the procedures for future seasons, while not making it too much like asking for their driver's license and a signature, signing contract and such. We have to find a balance there, but we'll work that out. Anyways, the guy subbed in upon being pressured and almost eliminated. He subbed into Mafia slot, decided to out the entire Mafia team, thus of course sabotaging and prematurely ending the game. So we called the game. But let's get on with the fun stuff, because there's still a lot of stuff to talk about, both in regards to the game and also, of course, general Mafia's topics. There's already a lot of activity in the chat, so I'm very happy to see that. Hello, Cruz. We have Cruz from the game. I'm sure he might have some questions like, why did you guys eliminate me? What the hell? We have Frog, we have Manasi, we have Jaleb, we have a lot of... we have, of course, Era in the chat, and GH. The podcast is planned to go for 1.5 hours, but it may unexpectedly end 20 minutes in. We don't really know. I got that joke from one of the guests, so thanks. All right, you guys, you can unmute yourselves. And let's get on to the introductions.
Bye.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you. Thanks for accepting. Well, let's do the introductions one at a time. Let's start with, because some people may be wondering, Arapocalypse doesn't have a video enabled, and she didn't want to do video, and because she's Arapocalypse, who we all love, I had to make an exception. I could not have Era, the hype queen, on the podcast. So, of course, she's here with her wonderful voice, repping Mafia Games Discord. She is a previous finalist and a staff member on MU, and she got first place in the votes. So she will be advancing to the semifinals. So we will definitely be seeing her again in a Mafia Championship context. Hello, Era, and please introduce yourself.
Hey, hello. So I am Arapocalypse, and I come from Mafia Games Discord, which is my home community. I started playing Mafia just over 6 years ago, though I've only been playing for Mafia since 2017. So on my home community, we play like really short, fast-paced, basically turbo type games that are super roll heavy. So like, the flavor on MU you see, it's like that except to an extreme. And it's a lot more fun and, well, not necessarily fun, but it's a lot more lighthearted than generally for Mafia is. And so yeah, I started playing there, and then I got into For Mafia a couple of years ago, and I've been playing for a while, and I got hooked from essentially my first game, and I'm still just as hyped as I was when getting into it, if not more, much more. Yeah. So yeah, and like you've mentioned, I've been in the Mafia Championships before in season 5, and yeah, so yeah.
And it's been amazing. Like I think, if I'm not mistaken, I reached out to you to invite you and your community
Yes, like
to the championship back in season 5. I didn't invite Arapocalypse specifically. She was the community leader, so I reached out to her, asked her, "Would you guys be interested in this?" And as it often happens, actually, it ended up being Arapocalypse going because she was the community leader. It's often those people that have the time and energy and dedication for the game. So she ended up going, and it's just funny how that conversation turned into Arapocalypse being a fully fledged regular and now staff member, been for some time on Mafia Universe.
yeah,
So
you showed up like I think it was mid season 4, and then I ended up being, I think I was the first person in my community to get into for Mafia off of that, and then
yeah,
season 5 is when it sort of snowballed.
yeah, and it happens every season. Like I don't think I know we haven't ever had a season where someone new to the site that came from that season didn't end up becoming a staff member, which is also just a fun thing that to see. It's a pleasure to have you, Arapocalypse. And as Ara mentioned, she's from Discord, chat, quick, fast-paced style Mafia. And we'll be talking about that today as well. The different metas and playstyles and standards and how those come together in a setting like this. Moving on to Lael, from the subreddit community of the Mods. Tell me if I'm pronouncing that right. Which is a first-time participating community. And I always love having first-time participant communities. Like I making it a point each season to try to seek out those new communities because I want the new blood in the championship. So it's I'm very happy that you decided to play on behalf of the community. Welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Yeah, g'day everyone. Are you hearing me right now?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, okay. All right, I wasn't getting feedback on myself. All right. Yeah, so I'm a politics nerd. I've worked in politics, and I post a lot about politics now that I'm no longer doing that. So that's what the mod is. It's, we talk about social and political issues that are very, very controversial, and the whole idea of the subreddit is it's a place where you can do that, and without it degenerating into flame wars. There's extremely strict tone monitoring and all of that. So
unlike Mafia games sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. You can get away with the kind of stuff we do on doing the games there. So yeah, but because we're all a bunch of nerds, and I just thought, hey, we could just some of the regulars could play a few games of various kinds here, and so I started up a semi-regular series where we do things like, our first one was diplomacy. We played a game of Mafia. The most recent one, we had a Dominion tournament. So yeah, so off that, Lisa reached out to us and said, hey, would you guys like to compete in the Mafia Championships? And as a person who was organizing the games, I got sent.
Awesome. We have Amy in the chat saying, Thingy, the real failure in vetting here is that you let an Aussie on the podcast. I gotta say, I'm very appreciative that you're on the podcast. What time is it in Australia right now?
Right now it is 6:11 a.m., so it's not even that bad.
It's not that bad, but I'm very sure that you are the first Aussie on the podcast, so I'm very thankful for you being here for this. And wow, I think this is we have 66 people watching right now, so I think this is the most we've had at the same time, simultaneous viewers for the podcast. So not to put any pressure on you guys, but you better deliver for the crowd. Moving on to and say hi.
I bring in the ratings. That's what it happens.
Actually, now that we have so many people here, this may keep you guys interested in being here more. For the rest of the podcast, I have a competition. Please enter a guess in the chat for how many times Arapocalypse will utter the word hype during the podcast. The time she's already done so does also count. How many times will Ara say hype during the podcast? Whoever is the closest to this will earn a custom use title on Mafia Universe, provided they don't already have one, or if they already have one, they can choose to change it if they so wish. This all depends on the fact that someone does have to actually count it up. So I feel bad for the person who has to do that, but it's dependent upon someone actually doing that. But that offer goes to anyone. Also, the guest here, you can type in a chat or say it here if you want for how many times Well, let me ask you, Daniel, because you're the one up next. Daniel, how many times will Ara say hype and hello?
Hello. I'm gonna guess 175.
175. All right, awesome. And this is Daniel, by the way. Let me give you a proper introduction. This is Daniel from the Beltree and Animal Crossing community. Is that right?
Yep.
Yes, that made it to the finals last year. Geo, I'm not sure how to. In Danish, we say Geo. But I think it has to be Geo. Made it to the finals last year. So he's on the jury also this year. So there's definitely something to live up to. But Daniel delivered and got second place in the voting for this game, and so he's also advanced into the semifinals. So we will be seeing again. And please introduce yourself, Daniel.
Yeah, so I'm Daniel. Something to say about me. I'm a third-year college student majoring in economics and political science. So I'm really into debate and everything like that. I'm on Animal Crossing forum, which sounds weird, but we're like a very, I think, rather active Mafia community. I think just like being able to play Animal Crossing kind of just take that break away from like all the stress and all the tension. That's a nice thing. And just like Mafia and Animal Crossing are like, really different, but like they're a nice contrast, and I think they really go well together, actually. And it's rather small, and I really enjoy that. I really enjoy playing with everybody there. I know Gio pretty well, and he basically, when it came time for this year, we wanted somebody different who hadn't played before in the champs. We wanted somebody who wasn't going to be in too much into the culture crash or going into emotions too much. So Gio was one of the people that reached out to me, and they agreed. So I went. So yeah.
Yeah, this is a pretty common theme we see when people like do well in the championship and they want to pass the torch on to another fellow community member, and they try to push a certain person or certain people into the spot. So this is a common theme we see, and because you have played before Mafia Universe, so you had the experience. So I imagine that's also part of the reason that he thought that you'd be a good fit for this. Also, not experience too much culture shock, presumably. Moving on to Zen Blade, Zen. Also, Zen Blade. Also from a first-time participating community, which again I just love this. Austin Hidden Role Gamers, which I believe you don't just strictly play Mafia. Is that correct? You play.
Yeah, we actually don't play proper Mafia. We play Werewolf, but similar thing, very similar. We play a lot of Werewolf. We play, some people like Secret Hitler, not a big Secret Hitler fan. And then my main group probably within there is Avalon. And so right now I'm not in my Avalon Sunday afternoon Avalon because I'm here on the podcast, because I thought it'd be great to participate in this. But we play all of our stuff is in person. Now with COVID here in the US, we're playing mostly Avalon online using Zoom and web browsers, but we still have images, so we can still get that person-to-person interaction. And I'll tell you right now, just like seeing all these folks live for the first time actually changed a lot. I could start reading a lot more like body language and such, which I thought was really nice. So.
That's very interesting. I mean, I guess people have also been saying this for a while, but we really should do a Mafia game on the podcast or stream sometime. So we will for sure be doing that. I have a lot of plans for this podcast.
I would totally recommend that. I used to watch the old, was it the Summit? Some of the old Dota stuff, I think it was, and they would do Werewolf or Mafia, whatever one it was, on their streams. And I always thought that was interesting.
For sure. And I guess a suggestion for you and anyone else out there who also doesn't know, there's because there are also other participating communities in the season actually that do streamed games on Twitch. Daily Mafia and Super Mafia All Stars, who are both communities that also have done very well historically in the championship. So they also do those games, and it's so it's just nice to see. And Liars Club, of course. Anyways, it's a pleasure to have you here, Zen Blade. So this is first time participating community, so it's very exciting. So this is very good for a future topic in this podcast of clashes and community and meta and standards and how that all interacts when you have people coming from different places. I saw someone in chat say that Ara doesn't at all look like what I expected. Yeah. So now that we have everyone introduced, let's talk about the game. And I guess the big topic, let's start with the big topic. which
you
is
didn't
how.
introduce me.
No, I didn't introduce Daya.
Daya.
It's because I didn't. I'm sorry. I have the notes here. It's because I didn't bold the name, so I just easily glance over it. We have Daya. Sorry, we have Daya, a fellow staff member. I even forgot my fellow dear staff member. Sorry, who subbed in for Burst, I believe it was, right?
Yes.
Hailing from Student Doctor Network. Also a place where they call it Werewolf and not Mafia. Daya first played in season 3. Where she won the game for the Wolves or the Mafia and didn't advance. Shame on whoever decided that. But it set up a good story for Daya because she then played again the next season, season 4, and where she advanced to the wildcards. And just like we had Silver Keith, who like did better and better each season, perhaps this will be the season for Daya because the season isn't necessarily over. We still have semifinal picks, right? So qualifiers, wildcards, and then let's see. Yeah, and Daya, and everyone who knows Daya from Mafia Universe will know that she's a very strong player and very well-respected player and member in general just of the community. Thanks for being here, Daya, as well, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Daya. I've been playing Mafia for 21 years. I started with in real life Mafia and really liked it, but couldn't find people to play with. And I saw someone talking about something similar on SDN one day. And it was the same game, so I started playing Forum Mafia then. I think that was about 11 years ago, something like that. But now I play regularly on Mafia Universe instead. I don't play as much on SDN anymore.
Daya needs no introduction, of course. That is why. Thanks. Happy to have you here, Daya. Happy to have you all here. Now moving on to the game. The game cancellation. The game being called because we all know what happened. I don't want to dwell too much on this because also sort of like with, not to equate the guy with a serial killer, but like I don't want to give attention to someone who does this maybe for attention, right? So I don't want to do that, but I do want to get like your thoughts on it because it's the thing that happened, and I also want to like let people react to it, and you don't have to like you don't have to be positive about it. Like if it's, I could imagine it sucks because you put a lot of effort into the game, right? So I just want to get your reactions to when the game was called and like, yeah. So anyone can take this.
Well, my first reaction when the game was called was that, well, at least I get to get out and return to Spec Chat in time for the Realm bet to be resolved. So there was a silver lining from my perspective there.
Or the Realm.
Yeah, and I lost on that one, so it wasn't as.
So it wasn't
I had another disappointment.
Yeah,
afterwards.
Just a bunch of disappointments.
That's my life, just a series of endless disappointments.
Yeah.
How did you react to Zen Blade? This was your first forum game, right? So
yeah, I think I'll be honest. Like this was not the best way to play a forum game or participate this for the first time.
Yeah.
So at the time when it was happening, I actually thought it was mostly somebody was mentally not all there, and so at times I was trying to be very sort of like kid gloves, just talking them through because it seemed like, and we get this. I work with a lot of students and such, and so you get this every so often where someone's just a little off. But afterwards, that's what happens. I think for me, the bigger thing I didn't like was the large number of inactives in our game. That to me meant the game was essentially broken from the start. On day 1, we had no active wolves or no active mafia. On day 2, we had 1, maybe 1.5. And on day 3, we had the incident. So you're playing a game of deception and such, and the whole time it's really just villagers acting with villagers. And so that wasn't a great way to be introduced to this, I would say.
That's understandable, and I'll say this, by the way, that was the first and only time ever that the entire Mafia team had to be subbed out. So it's just overall a bunch of unusual things happening with this game. And I guess, well, that's what I'm hearing at least. So let's maybe also talk about that the fact that there's maybe going to be a reunion game. I think there's been some talk of that. I think maybe Arapocalypse together with Lissa is organizing this. Is that true?
Yes, so we're planning the reunion game to be starting actually tomorrow, which is going to be super hype. And yes, so the 29th, so that's going to be with most of the people who played, except we're still trying to follow up with one or two people, but hopefully we'll be able to finish a game and have that sort of resolution. Because I mean, personally, I was pretty devastated over having the game. Like, I checked my when it ended. I had checked my phone. And I was like, oh, I got a PM with the entire Mafia team.
Yeah.
And I just sort of internally screamed into Bliss's DMs and stuff, and it was not hype. But,
not very hype.
No, it was not hype at all. And then just having to deal with that the entire night after, it's just like getting a reunion game together and just seeing being able to have like an actual game is just that's super hype.
Yeah. No. And I guess since I didn't explicitly say this, I will say this. Like, I apologize on behalf of the organizations that we could let something like this happen.
Honestly, I think the best thing about it was that it got caught and like dealt with so quickly, and it's nice to see that like everyone else that we're playing with has really solid integrity, because everyone that they PM'd the Mafia team to, they just went straight to Lissa and just were like, this is
no, for sure.
It was just dealt with. At least it wasn't. It could have gone a lot worse. Let's just say.
It could have gone a lot worse. So like I echo that. Like, the silver lining certainly is, like, it solidified what great players and people we have here. Got along with each other and all showed good solidarity and integrity by revealing immediately that they got this PM right. Certainly not a first great game for you, Zen Blade. So I'm curious, who here is playing the reunion game? Please raise your hands if you're playing in it.
I think we all are.
We all are playing here, yes.
All right. Ara, you're not raising your hand. No, I'm kidding.
Raises my ghosty hand.
Raising your ghosty hand.
I think we're currently right at 12 people. We're just missing 3 people. And so we're currently trying to get a 12er set up. But like, we're having difficulties deciding on one. So hopefully we can get a 13th person in, and then we don't have to deal with that.
Yeah, no, 13 players work a lot better. I don't know who was the host of that game, the flavor writer. Maybe they could join.
Maybe that would be an interesting consideration.
Yeah,
we'll have to discuss it, I guess.
Yeah. That's an idea. But I lost my train of thought because you also, I don't know if the rest of you have any thoughts on like your reactions to this or whatever. I had some thoughts, but I lost my train of thought. Yeah.
I thought it was initially that he was getting too tilted. I didn't think it was a game integrity breach. In Wolf chat, he had said some things that made me think he was starting to lose it a little. And in chat, it was starting to get, or in the actual forum thread, it was starting to get really intense. So I thought he was going to be taking a break and being subbed out. I wasn't expecting the game integrity breach at all.
Yeah. And that's what we, of course, thought at first as well, until we looked into it further. If anyone's curious, this hasn't happened before in Mafia Universe. It's happened once before on another site called 2+2. It was in a big game, so that makes it even worse. This is also very bad, but that was a game with 50 plus players and a person putting a lot of effort into designing the game, and that wasn't someone doing it that was because of frustration in that case, that the person did it. Just very poor, but it happened. We're moving on. There's a reunion game already starting tomorrow. I'm very happy to hear that. I hope you'll get a better experience than that one, Zen Blade. So another product or interesting thing to discuss with the game ending so soon is the votes, because what was decided was that people still had to vote. There were 2 options provided to the players: either restart the game, rerun the game, or skip straight to voting. I'm actually curious here. Did anyone here vote to re-rent the game? Was anyone up for that? You can just raise your hand if anyone was. So Zen was sort of, I'll probably go along with it, I guess.
Yeah, I was I kind of felt like I'll do it whatever everybody wants, because it's a lot of time and energy. And so if people aren't able to do that again, we should stop it. But I actually was very straight up. I did not think we should vote. I thought probably no one should be advanced on voting, because it's kind of like playing in America we call it soccer, but football game or a baseball game, and stopping in the first couple of innings in baseball, the first early part of the football game, you don't really know what's happening. And so you don't really have the ability to evaluate people fairly. And the only person I thought could earn a vote would have been Ara, because she had, at least as jack of all trades, she had at least inspected two mafia members, even though she didn't see they were. She had at least done something in that direction. Everyone else, it was just too early in my mind to make an assumption about whether they were playing well or not playing well. And so it's really, and that's why the votes for everybody, like there's so many people getting lots of votes. That's why, right? Nobody knew what to do.
Yeah. I'm curious, would you have or what was your thought, that the jury should pick someone, or that no one should be picked? Like, what would the alternative be?
I don't think we should have voted on each other. It's just, we can't, like, it's really, I don't know that anybody could say they deserve to advance, right? Like, we can talk about all the things that happened, and that might be a good discussion here, but essentially it was villagers playing against villagers on the first day or two. Daya came in and she started becoming active, but she wasn't going to get on the block on the second day, right? It was crews versus not crews. And it was essentially most of that day just villagers arguing against villagers about whether to kill crews or not. And so it wasn't really until day 3 that we started to look at anything else. And at that point, the game blew up. So I don't know.
I understand. I have some thoughts, and I'd certainly like to play devil's advocate to that. But I'm curious if the rest of you agree that that you shouldn't have voted on each other because of how the game ended.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because like I was sort of like Zen. I would have, as long as we've had a break, I was happy to go and play the game again. But there were a lot of people who were, quite emotionally drained and didn't want to play again. And I had to respect that. You can't ask them, especially Fleur had got on the receiving end of some pretty nasty abuse from Brad before he went and outed the team. So going to the voting, it was very hard to decide how to vote, because because you don't know how it's all going to play out over the first 3 days. You can look at someone like Kevin. Well, okay, he's voted the wolf every time. Does that deserve recognition? Would he have done once that drums Brad slot was gone? Would he have been able to find another? Would he, based on how his play was going, maybe he wasn't going to contribute that well in the over the rest of the game, but you don't know. So it's very, very hard to come to a good assessment of who deserves to advance. And I think that's true whether it's the players voting or whether it's the jury voting. It's just, yeah.
So my thoughts, and I guess Daya, Daniel, and Ari, you can also expand on this if you agree or disagree. Like, it's a difficult situation, so you just have to make the best of it. And to start with, the Mafia Championship, we don't claim it to be a perfect competition. We don't claim. If anyone has that impression, it's wrong. And I hope we can only make it clear. It's as a social event, first and foremost. And with a competitive nature to it, because it's fun to spectate and see these communities clash. But it's for fun. It's a competition for fun, is basically how I'd phrase it. And so it's not perfect to begin with. In this situation, first, I completely understand. I would have also voted for the game to not be re-ran because it's a lot of effort, and I can understand not being willing to put forth that effort again, because some of the players would have had to still play 2 more games after that, so they would have had to play 4 games total, which is already quite a lot. So I can understand that going down that route. So how to make the best of it? Well, it would have been a shame to not advance anyone from the game. So the question to me remains: should it be the same, that the players decide to advance and the jury decides whether there should be any more and how many more? And I think this, I like this way of doing it because I don't want to take the power away from the players. I can certainly understand that it's difficult to vote, but everyone's voting with the same information. And if anything, and this is what I found interesting, there's two things to this. Normally with these votes, they are very MVP biased, which means they're very centered around who actually did the best in the game, even though we say that it's not supposed to be about that. It's supposed to be about who you think is the best player, because to give an example that exemplifies why this, at least in the tournament organizer's opinion, isn't the best way to do it. If someone is killed night one for nailing the entire Mafia team, they can't go on to do anything about that for the rest of the game. But you could see that they had all the right thought process, if they did, of course, and they were just very impressive. So, of course, that player deserves consideration, but that wouldn't happen if it was an MVP bias vote, because they couldn't actually impact the game because they were killed early. So this, because of how the game was ended here already on day 3, no one lived much longer than anyone else. So in that way, it's more fair in that regard. Everyone had closer to the same amount of time to prove themselves. Of course, it's still not the same. It can't be, because people were killed on day 1 and night 1 compared to other people, right? But also, then the second thing is the subs, right? That there were no Mafia. Well, it's still the same, right? So you're judging people based on, I think, even more of their thought process, because you can't be biased by whether they were right or wrong. Everyone, if they were right, they were just pointing to inactives. And if they were wrong, they were pointing to villagers. But then everyone was pointing to villagers. So it's about how were they pointing to villagers? What were the cases? What were the thought process? And you can still evaluate that. And if anything, I think it's at least an interesting thought experiment or experiment to do to see how the votes are. And we can see that in how the votes were. And let me just actually summarize that. What happened was dyachei got 18 points, dyachei got 18 points, and they tied for third. Caddy 91 and Daniel got 19 points and tied for second. So we had 4 people very close to each other, and I think that's definitely a result of it being difficult to separate players because of this.
And I actually had Dyer as second on my votes, and I was really kind of agonizing about whether to put her first or second. So, it could easily have been a 3-way tie for second.
Oh, you cheated her out of a semifinal spot, Ash.
I felt bad about it. I thought she was going to run away with it.
Yeah.
And I think part of the issue with having it end so early is that you do, I mean, maybe not so much issue, but you do have to focus a lot more on the process versus results based. And then you have to look a lot more at someone's general process, like you were saying earlier, Thini. And a lot of it is also that we sort of got cheated out of showing off our endgame skills. Like, no one really got to see, oh, this is how you would play after one Mafia flips, although we sort of got a bit of that on day 3 because we were assuming Brad was Mafia for half the day. But we still didn't really get that sort of endgame play or any of that, or anything after that.
That's a very good point, and I forgot
not be able to.
I would like to. I want to echo what Era said there a little bit. I want to push back in a friendly way, push back a little bit about what you're saying, Thingy Man, which is when you're playing a game like Mafia, and where I play it's Werewolf, we have a big group. A good player knows you don't want to die in the first day or 2. And if you're playing such that you're identified and killed early, you have not played well because you've hurt your team, right? So you have to play. There's a psychology there where you have to live long enough that you can put the pieces together or help your team put the pieces together. And so, like Era just said here, the real part of the game happens once the first couple of people are dead, and now you're trying to put those pieces together and figure out how the puzzle connects. And so when we miss all of that in the game, all you got was the opening salvos. All you got was the baseline. And so when I argue kill inactives, it's because I'll tell you right now, the psychology is the same. If you're evil, you tend to talk way less, whether it's in person, on video chat, or in typing. You just tend to be less engaged. And so if people are less engaged, they're hurting the village team. And so you want to get rid of them as quickly as possible, because you'd rather have an engaged villager or an engaged wolf who's going to make mistakes than somebody who's not engaged. And so I do want to push back a little there where you say, well, day 1 and day 2, we basically know what happened. It's not really. I mean, Dia would have been hard to find, but as soon as Era comes out as jack of all trades, the game changes a lot. And now suddenly she's going to look really good, and there's going to be a very different interpretation of the game. Benny was going to be in a lot of trouble because he went quiet so hard on day 2, and that was a really bad sign for him. But the game would have changed a lot over the next couple of days.
I think. Sorry.
Go, Daya.
I think that a lot of what's being looked over, though, is the importance of D1 and D2 game play from players. D1 and D2 are some of the most important days in a Mafia game. You get that baseline on who you want to go after. You get an idea of if they're playing villagery or not. There are just so many things you get from it, and you get that first vote and whether or not that's right. You get to look at it in comparison to the counter wagon and see if that's correct or not. There's just so much that goes into it that I think it's fair to base people mostly on D1 and D2 gameplay. And we even got part of D3 before everything hit the fan. So I don't think it's unfair to say, we should be evaluating people based on what they've put into the thread so far. And that's one of the reasons I personally voted Ara first, because she put a lot of really good gameplay into the first 2 days. Even though she was suspected, she was doing that to hide herself as the Jote, and that was good gameplay from her.
Yeah. I think what Zen is touching on here actually comes from a chasm, a divide in thoughts of how to approach the game. And there are two different trains of thought, and I've evolved from one to the other. And I would say I'm maybe probably in the middle, because I respect both points of view actually. And the two trains of thoughts are, if you aren't a power role and a townie, you should be just like giving it your all. Try to vote wolves while you can. You never know what's going to happen. And and if you fall on a sword and die before a power role villager or townie, that's good, right? The other train of thought is, well, if you believe that you are a good player who can have impact on the game, like if you believe you are the best player in the world, a good strategy wouldn't be for you to go all guns out blazing at day 1. Instead, you should try to save yourself for later in the game. By maybe downplaying or hiding some things, or however you want to do it, or seeming a bit scummy but not too scummy, or however you want to play it, and then have that impact when it matters the most later in the game. And it seems like Zen is more so a supporter of the latter play style. And I know another player, Soa from 2+2, a former second place finisher overall in the season, is also a fan of that thought process, and I can understand why, because I know him to be a very strong player. So why would he try to get himself killed night 1 when he could play live in game and decided for his team there, right? Of course, it has other benefits. If you try to play sort of in the middle, may become more difficult to also reach you as scum, I guess.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I think the point is that by playing more in the middle, you keep yourself alive, but you also are harder to read regardless of your role, right? Because you're playing really different than it's real obvious to see what you are.
Yeah, although there's also... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just touch briefly on that, and I'll give it over to you, Ara. Because if you're, that's another thing. If you're trying to, I guess what Zen is saying here, because if you're a believer that you should save yourself late in the game, it's not very fair that people are trying to read you based on days 1 and 2. So I'll just keep it to that briefly. And Ara, you can of course comment now. Sorry.
I'm not going to go on too much about this because I could talk about this for days, but it's mostly just like a Mafia philosophy difference in that, like, if I come from the mindset where if everyone tries their best to do their project town essentially, then like, and no matter, even if you die night 1, like, or night 2, although that's more of a PR issue, which is sort of different, but like, essentially, if everyone tries to project town as much as they can, then it gets easier to find each other, and it creates a box that you put Mafia in, and then you end up killing them, that sort of thing. But going back to the getting killed night 1 and 2, that's more of a thing where, like, it depends a lot whether you're vanilla town or a PR, such as if you're vanilla town, it's generally a bit more advantageous for you to try and, eat the PR bullet, and less so if you're a PR and stuff like that.
And like, if you've got a bunch of good players, well, like they can't kill them all night one.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
just go all out.
Yeah.
And that's also part of it, right? You don't know what's going to happen. There are so many thoughts to the kill, and Holy Fair says something, and he's saying it sort of as a joke, but I guess there could also be some truth to it. Play so towny that the Mafia fears you're going to get docked, that you're going to get protected, right? That is also a thing, right? Like, they can't waste their precious night kill. That would be a disaster for the Mafias to not hit someone and kill them successfully night one. So if you're the obvious towny night one, at least in this setup, or with any duck in the setup, you're presumably not going to get targeted. It's also another thing.
Yeah, also another thing is that like when all the townies are active, like to be fair, like most of day one was just town, but like if you're there, then you can start just figuring stuff out and narrowing down the PoE for the Mafia, and you can still do things in day 1 and 2, even if it's not really going to be necessarily as on point on later days, but they're still like you can still do major things then.
Era, did you think we had found most of the town on day 2? I would say I felt like we kind of did. Like I had a short list of people who were not projecting town.
Yeah, like I think we all had a lot of us had pretty similar PoEs.
Yeah, like obviously I was very hard on crews, but then my 2 and 3 slots were drums and steel, which were both scum. So and that was same for a lot of people, where our process of elimination was getting quite narrow. And yeah, you go poke at Zen, like, okay, I think he's town, and you go poke at Daniel or whoever, and it's like, okay, no, looks like we've just got a whole bunch of town here.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, like I think all of us had suspected drums or steel, like by like the beginning of the day, and the main part of that was just lack of engagement. They really just weren't there. So like they really weren't doing things that made them towny. And then you see like what the little they did post was like not a lot. And they kind of neglected to like kind of engage with like what was really going on. So like I think that if you're planning to be more reserved, like that's like a double-edged sword, because sure you can live longer, but like what's the benefit of living longer if you're going to be suspected for like not engaging as well? And as like somebody who was killed night 2, like I put all my all into it. I really wanted to kind of set that foundation for town, and I think kind of having that really good discussion, encouraging players to talk. I think that's a greater benefit.
That's a good point. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Sen. Like, you have someone playing MILF Road, but you reach endgame, and you don't have the clout or the credit to actually cause the impact that you want to cause in that scenario.
I think you play middle of the road until you know what's happening, right? So you play that middle of the road to sort of get information, and then at some point things just click, and then you put out that theory and you just say, we got to go hard this way. Like what was interesting is, on day 2, I trusted Daniel and Era from the forum side of the game. And what I mean by that is they clearly played forum before. They were doing whatever this meta is, which most people were, which I was not doing. And then I like Flora and Decay. They seem to have more of these in the moment response things that to me just felt really like honest and genuine, which is what I like. And so I kind of let them control my vote. And so at the end there, we ended up killing Cruz, but it was essentially most of us didn't want to actually kill him. It was just sort of like, we have to get the game moving, so I guess we're going to kill Cruz. But drums is probably a better target, which is, when that happened to me, it was just like, okay, the werewolves or Mafia they're not doing anything. This is weird. So,
would you say that you went on cruise control? That one's for you, Chad. But Sen, I'm actually curious to get specifics. So so I assume you played Milth Road, right? So
yeah,
what?
I play very middle of the road until I know what's happening, and then I.
So specifically, I'm wondering, in this game, what did you do that you otherwise wouldn't have done if you weren't worried about having to survive, if you weren't worried about survivability?
I always play that I'm worried to survive, because we talked about this in the game. A lot of us tend to die day 1, day 2, night 1, night 2 in our games at home. So I always play that way on purpose. I would say if I weren't worried for some reason, I don't think it would have. I just always like to play a very gray area constantly. Like I'm not sure what's happening. I like to do that a lot. Being very forceful when need be. I like to do that. So.
I'm not sure. It could also be that you've maybe, this is a question I don't know the answer to it, you've maybe adapted the style because it gives you a good foundation for reading people. I know at least when I'm behaving a certain way, and then I read people based on how they interact with me. But if I'm suddenly acting different, then people are going to act different. And if I'm not used to that, I don't know how to read them because it's new.
You want to throw people off a little bit. You want people to be a little more playing your game than you playing their game. And that helps. But what's also good is if you're following the logic tree with somebody in direction, and now suddenly someone dies, something happens, and they go in a different direction than you can now come back and say, wait a second, how do we get there? And see if you're both on the same page, or if you're on different pages, something's wrong. And so that's like why when Daniel died, I was shocked. I didn't think he would die. I thought if you were Era, we were going to die, it was going to be Era. But when you died, and I think Dia and other people said, oh yeah, that makes sense. To me, that was like a trigger of, okay, this person's on my radar, because I would have never killed him. I would have let everybody on Cruz live, and I would have taken a shot at Decay, because I thought she and maybe Era were the jack of all trades. Those two were the ones who were screaming Jote in my mind. So that was just a weird kill, and then I was just like, okay, something's not right.
Yeah. Were you in the game when Daniel was killed?
Yeah, I joined night 1, so I actually coordinated the night 1 and night 2 kills.
Can you
carried all kills?
Yeah, I carried all the kills.
Grumble.
And carried the team. Could you tell us a bit more about why you killed Daniel, since we have him here?
Well,
actually, if I can just interject, can you also tell us how you read Dan and Legend Dan and how you sniped him?
So I was going through all the posts that had happened day 1 as part of subbing in, and I came across a post by Daniel where no one had been talking about mechanics at all, and Legend Dan popped up with, hey, this is how I think the Jote should play. And no one really interacted with him on it. And I just had a really strong feeling that he was the Jote from that. So I went ahead and I submitted the kill on him. I asked my teammates first. They weren't very responsive. So we went ahead and did that. And he was a Jote, so I was pretty happy with that. With Daniel, he had a couple of mechanic type posts as well that other people weren't interacting with as much either, so it kind of made me suspect that he might be Jote. I didn't actually think it was Ara. I thought Ara was going to be a Miss Lynch later.
Oh, interesting.
I have to say that like I was just being really town red like towards the end of day 2, and I was like, oh, okay, like this is a good chance that I might die, because like at least in my home forum, the people who get town red the most widely are usually the first dead, because you can't really lead a lynch on them. So like that's why like I wasn't surprised that I died. But yeah, like that was just me.
Yeah. No, and it's the same from the communities where I come from, and I guess part of that may be because I at least come from a community where a certain setup, this is the COP 13er, if people know it, a setup where the COP, there's a COP in the game, and they can peek players, investigate players. And so the game is centered around protecting that player. So it's very centered around people projecting strongly town, so they can take a bullet for that role instead. So that's just sort of the meta that developed from that. Anyways, I'm also very curious, actually, to hear you guys' speculations on how the game would have played out if it hadn't ended the way it did. Which is to say, let's say someone who doesn't plan to out the entire Mafia team subs in instead. How does the game proceed from there, you think?
Well, it's sort of hard to, are we assuming that Brad does like
assume that we just hammer Brad?
Okay, assuming that we hammer.
We nearly did.
Yeah.
I
assume that.
It would have been really interesting because I think I probably would have ended up outing on either day 4 or day 5, depending on how things go on day 4. And the fact that I did that, and I had like Dia, Vinny, and the other Hallie, and like my PV, I feel like I would have tried to push that in general. But also Dia said that they would have counterclaimed to me, which would have been so hype to do. Oh my gosh.
I would have. My goal was not
amazing.
My goal was not to live to endgame once Hallie subbed in. My goal was to keep the pressure off Hallie.
Yeah, I think it would have been. I think Village ends up winning it, but I think there would be that issue where we might mislich Era, but when that happens, Die is next, and then it's down to one, and at that point, you've got to think, okay, Ash clearly town, Floor clearly town, Decay clearly town. I'm assuming I'm probably considered town, but maybe not.
I think it was Food Town from Brad. Yeah.
Yeah, and then my Caddy was clearly town. That core is going forward, and you can't kill all of them really quick. And so the question then is, Kevin was clearly town, like
Ash was clearly town.
Kevin was clearly. So you have a half dozen people who are clearly town, and then you have these question marks, and it's a race. But once Era comes out, which is probably the next flinch, her or Vinny is the next flinch in my mind. And if Dia counters that, now suddenly we might kill Ara, but we're going to get Dia the next day. So
I was going to push. I was going to push for Vinny next, but I also think that hindsight is 2020, and I do think Hallie and I could have brought it a lot further. I don't think we would have been done by day 6 necessarily, or day 5 necessarily.
Definitely
I really think we would have pushed it further than that. You're forgetting that a lot of people in game, once Hallie joined the game, thought she was town.
That is true.
I think it would have been interesting to see how it would have gone out with me and Dia counterclaiming, and I would have liked to say I would have pushed Hallie as the partner, but I don't know, it could have been anyone else. So I think it's really difficult now.
Go ahead.
But no, that's it.
I think the Vinny push would have been a good. That makes the most sense to me, and it was going to be hard to get me off of to replace. Vinny was replaced, I think, by Penguin. It would have been hard to get me on them on town. I think that's almost certainly a mislynch. I agree with you there.
Yeah. So say Vinny's a miss elimination, and then there's a claim battle, and Era goes down, and of course then you maybe have Dia next, right? But because Townies don't know how to react in that situation, and Townies would have maybe mis-eliminated Era, Townies look bad from that, and that causes paranoia, and the ball starts rolling from there, right? So it is hard to say.
Yeah, I had this whole theory about Vince and Ara, obviously, and I put the case together, and I was like, well, am I sure? Well, no, I'm not sure. Like, are they really both? Did I catch them both? That seems unlikely, but maybe. But I thought, okay, what I'll do is I'll just push it as darn hard as I can, and let's see if I get killed. And if I'm right, and they know that I'm a tunneler, they're going to well, we can't have this guy on our backs. We just have to kill him. So, and if that's the case, then I've left a legacy. But if I survive to day 4, then I've got the option to say, well, maybe I was wrong and try and reassess. Because, I was feeling it that I didn't reassess when I should have with Cruz. And I didn't want to make that mistake again. I don't know what would have happened. I think Vince did look pretty bad. And I think that he probably does end up mislynched anyway. But yeah, you just don't know until you play it out.
I think there was a possibility for a Fleur mis-elimination too.
Really?
And I really do.
I don't think after Brad.
Yeah, I think Brad went at her so hard, and it was really personal, and it was just like, it was going to be hard to...
Brad went after me too. And he went after me just as hard.
But she was in the moment with him at the time of the slip too. Don't forget that. Like, it was her who caught him first. It's like, do you say that was theater between Brad and Fleur? Did they look capable of that sort of theater? I don't think so. It doesn't look like a place.
I think there's a possibility of it, and I'm just ignoring the stuff with Brad because obviously that was not playing in good faith. So I don't know that we can really do too much reading off of that if we're thinking about hypotheticals.
Yeah. I think it would have been really interesting would be if Mafia had gone for the Sir Kevin kill mis-elimination, because that he just sat on drums for the entire game as we know it. So that could have been pushed as a bus,
It was something we were talking about. Was leaving him alive so that he could be pushed.
Yeah.
I mean, my biggest thing on Kevin was that he just didn't ever explain his drum sets. He just said that one post was weird and that was it the whole time. Yeah. But then you always you look at the end of day behavior and the voting, and that kind of changed my mind a bit. So like I'm not sure if it would have been possible, but like I don't think he ever did explain exactly why he was sus of drums, which was very off to me.
He said gut. He said gut.
Yeah, like exactly. Like that's not really like, you know.
Because like I did look at his meta during the game, and he had gotten like 2 or 3 Mafia or something on the first page in like at least a couple of games, which is what got him sent to champs. So that was sort of what I figured was what was going on there.
And he came in saying, I can do these amazing day one gut reads later in the game. I get worse. And I'm like, okay, so, and then he actually delivers on that. And you're like, wait, hang on. You know, there was like no Mafia on day one, and he caught one when we're barely there. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
By the way, I just want to say we have Hallie in the chat, so shout out to Hallie.
Hey Hallie! Hey Hallie! Hey Hallie! She's the best scum partner ever.
For my money, I think that Hallie might have actually won it in Final 3 for the scum. But yeah you don't know.
But here's my issue with substitutions, right? That's because she substituted in and seemed really engaged on the substitution. So you lost that whole first couple of day baseline, right? Which is, I mean, almost if I wanted just my team to win, I would almost as a Mafia play for 2 or 3 days and then just disappear and say, sub me in, sub somebody else in. Like, that is probably better for the Mafia team in some sense, if you can basically elude a day or 2 of suspicion by just switching in or out.
Just from the MU standpoint, we don't really allow subs for that reason.
Okay.
Like, you have to have a legitimate reason to be subbing out typically. And regardless of how much better it was for the scum team, subbing into this game where every single one of us were under suspicion was hard as hell.
Yeah, like, so I imagine it would have been so really difficult to play with.
Yeah, I think I see where you're coming from, Sen. I definitely see the thought process behind it. I do think as a general forum meta, it's very difficult for subs. Like, they are on average way more likely to get eliminated than other players are, because it's a rough start. And there's also, and I guess part of it is also, there's a theory that's called Werewolf sub the fuck out. There's a belief that players are less likely to want to play as scum than as town. And there's statistics that sort of indicate this, but not overwhelmingly so.
Not. It's like very, very minimal chance.
It's very minimal. It's very minimal. And it's certainly so minimal that you shouldn't, like, on a one sub basis, it's not worth using. You're way more better off just reading the player, of course. And I imagine this also differs from community, because what I'm referring to is statistics from another side than this one.
I'm not gonna lie, that's what I thought happened when Vince subbed out.
Yeah. And that's all.
Can't be for Mafia.
No, I thought so too. I thought Brad was maybe, whatever the character of Brad was, I thought they might have been going crazy on the personal message side, like on the Mafia team. Like, they had been blown and somebody was getting pissed and they were screaming and shouting there potentially. And so if I were in that position and somebody was ruining the game, I would be like, screw this. This is not worth it. And so that's why I was constantly like, why are people subbing out? We lost so many people. Can someone explain to me why we're losing people left and right? That made the game really, really challenging.
For sure. And it's also challenging because, at least the standard on MU is that we don't talk about subbing, because then you're reading into that and you shouldn't be reading into that. So it's not good for game integrity. Like, it's not perfect by any means, and you don't have them live games usually. So it's unique to form, and it's just making the best of a bad situation, because it's about what impacts game integrity and game more, and it certainly impacts more if you have to mod kill a slot, and that's just no fun. So that's just how we do it. I certainly don't expect or hope there will be so many subs in your reunion game, so I hope that goes better. I think let's move on to a fun topic. I don't know if you're still out there, Cruz, and I don't know if you consider this a fun topic, actually, but I do want to talk about, because we only have 2 eliminations to talk about. Cruz is there, I see. What's up, Cruz? I'll preface this with context about Cruz. So Cruz is from 2+2, the site that I don't originate from, but I played a lot on over 60 games. And it's where the Mafia Championship was originally hosted, for those who don't know. Seasons 1 and most of Season 2 was hosted on 2+2. Cruz has been in the running to be in this for several years, and there's a meme on 2+2 that Cruz is a villager, and then you lime green his name. So it's just quite ironic that he turns up mislimbed in this game, based on that. And this was, as you say, because, well, maybe not so much on day 2, where his mislimb happened, but still somewhat on day 2, a case of, well, there's just a bunch of townies and threats, so who's gonna get limbed here and why? So why did it end up being Cruz? Maybe let's start with that.
I mean, from my perspective, Ash had been pushing it from the start of day 2, so I actively did want to consider the perspective that he could be Mafia, but like when he wasn't really showing up for like the first half, that was the main thing that got me sketched out.
I think
yeah.
I think a lot of it was the defense style that ended up getting him misaligned. He tended to just talk about how town he was, but not really showing how he was town. And I think that I was even arguing against his elimination. And I think that people just saw that and thought, he has to be a wolf. He can't be a villager here.
Yeah, like, I mean, so I started pushing him obviously on day 1 just because, Vince made a point, hey, look, he's sort of posting but not really contributing a lot. Maybe he's just trying to fly under the radar. So I was like, okay, let's put a bit of pressure here and see what happens. And he didn't react well to pressure. And, I guess I just read more into that than I should have. But, you get to the end of day 1 and the 3 options there, Kevin, it was an option for a while, but then his wagon switched all over to Ike after Ara brought a case on him. And, those players were both town as well. So
there was Burt's was considered. Somebody
only by you, yes.
Only by you.
Yeah. I just
and there was 1 vote on drums as well. So
I mean, on late day 1, just before I was going to switch it to Ike, it was like I was looking at the the Kevin wagon, and I was sort of like, this is too comfy. I have to do something. So I was between Ike, drums, and steel, but like Ike's
and you picked the wrong one.
Yeah, well, Ike was the one that posted stuff at EOD where I was like, ugh, and then I just sort of went there.
Yeah. So you put forward the case, and it was a strong case. I really, I loved it. It was half an hour before end of day, and I was really seriously considering it and reevaluating. And so I gave him a poke and said, well, if you think we should just lynch someone at random, how do you feel about taking one for the team and being the mislynch? And he was like, yeah, I think it would be a waste, but do what you like. Which everyone was like, what the heck is that reaction?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of did him in.
Oh, absolutely. That like in real life, like I, whether the response is on a forum or not, if it's real time, I think a lot of the same psychology applies, right? If someone has 20 minutes to write a message and can review it, psychology's gone. But the same psychology if it's real time. And his real time responses were just like, I don't know what's happening. Don't kill me, kill someone else, whatever. I probably am a villager. And it was just like, he's dead. And I thought Cruz's responses, though, to me screamed somebody who was like, I'm a villager, guys. What else can I tell you? I'm just a villager. And he was responding so quickly. It to me felt very genuine. And then, like I think Ara said, when he dropped off on day 2, I got a little worried, but I still felt Cruz was a villager contributing.
And I'm actually going to take responsibility for that too, because I came out breathing fire on the start of day 2, and I think that I don't know what was going through his head, but he might have even thought, it's better for the town overall if I just dip out, so I can't be in the center of any more drama, and just let them focus on other people. So, which I don't know if that was intentional on his part, but it probably was better for the game that he did do that. And I should have been a bit calmer at that point.
Yeah, you came out breathing fire and you turned him to ash.
Yeah.
You bastard. And I mean, it really is a shame that you couldn't drum off enough votes to get a wolf lynch. You were on the right track sometimes, but you just needed a mind of steel to get it done. All right, no more puns. We have Cruz in the chat, of course. He's saying, I want to read up his message. He's saying, it was funny / feels bad, man. How I've been wanting to get in a champs game since like season 1, but there's such a large talent pool of players from 2+2. It took 7 seasons to get my shot. Then I end up being main wagon day 1, killed day 2, and the game gets teddied. I don't fault the players for going after me. I could have played better. It happens, part of the game. Even the very best player to have ever played the game, we don't know who that is, will have been misaligned in some of his games. So it happens. You can't prevent
the
that.
whole cruise thing, like, it's a prime example of kind of just culture clash, and like not knowing meta. Like, I think if somebody who came from his site was there, like they would have known, like, okay, this is regular for him. Like they kind of know, like he might state his own meta, but that's kind of weird because you really don't know sometimes what you do subconsciously. And I think like we just couldn't rationalize like the different way that he played. And that's just like a big thing about the champs, is that you don't know these people, like you've never played with them most of the time. You don't know like how they normally would react, and sometimes you can't force them to play the way that you want, but you kind of have to rationalize, like, are they playing at least with the idea of helping town, or like with the idea that they don't really know what's going on, or are they trying to deliberately ruin things, or they know too much and like they're being reserved for that reason. So I think with Cruz, like it was like prime example of just culture clash.
For sure, and we'll be moving on to that in just a sec. With regards to meta, I mean, the meta that everyone's missing is that Cruz is always a villager. That's very important meta to not know. Certainly destroy this game here. We also have Captain Hindsight in chat writing, if you don't believe the meta someone is telling you exists, ask them for links to a game and check into it. It's not that hard, really. I would say it's more complicated than that. First, there are people who certainly don't believe in meta reads. To those who don't, to those who do, might not believe in them in this context, because the championship setting is a very different setting. It's a setting where you're playing with people you haven't played with before, so that makes it different. It's a setting where you're playing to advance, so that makes it very different. It's a setting where you maybe get frustrated because you're playing with new players. Usually you're playing with your friends, so they might annoy you, but you're not as prone to get as frustrated because they are your friends. You don't want to shout and curse at your friends. With people who aren't your friends yet, at least, you're maybe more likely to say, screw it, I'm going to curse because you're frustrating me right now. These things happen, right? Cat petting hype. Yes, we have a cat in the chat, or a cat on the podcast. What's his or her name, Daya?
This is Apollo.
Apollo. Hi, Apollo.
Hey, Apollo.
Just real attention starved because I've been on this podcast for a while now.
Daya, I have to ask, is that a lolcat?
I think so.
Are you giving up? Daya's outed wolf, indeed.
Outed wolf.
Daya.
Actually, I also just want to mention, I should have mentioned this way earlier if I haven't already. Chat, feel very free to ask questions. You have already listened to me read up some statements from chat, but feel very free to ask questions if you have any questions for any of these guys here. We were just talking about culture clash, so let's move on to that topic very appropriately. We've been talking about different metas and backgrounds on a general level before, but I'd actually be interested to hear if any of you have specific examples of where you clash with other players in this game, and how so, or how you experience other players clash. Just to get down to specifics, because I think it would be interesting to touch on it on a more specific level, just general, because it's easy to say, yeah, it's going to be clashes, but what actually happened and what could be done, and etc.
I think one very clear culture clash, even though it wasn't really a culture on my part, was I came in role playing, which threw a few players for a loop. Particularly Cruz, who didn't like it at all. I'd never tried anything like that, or I just saw Frinkles doing it in game 1, and I was like, that looks fun. Let's do that and see how it goes. And yeah, so I think partly because of that, he didn't know how to read me, and he ended up having some very erratic reads and flipping on me and off me, and that was part of the reaction that kind of, got me really sus of him. So yeah, I think that was probably one clear example. And Zen versus a lot of the others of us with perspectives on lynching inactives got a bit willing as well.
Yeah.
I think we already heard some of the clash here. We heard people talk about how they interpreted how players were interacting in the game, and how they took those interpretations and it meant they must be bad or good based upon their own personal play style. So for me, day one especially is all about just getting that baseline, talking to people. Day one, I had a number of times where I just would say stuff just to hear and get that voice. And once you get a sense as to who's playing what, then you go from there to look for inconsistencies. And so for me, the two sides again were Daniel and Ara from this forum style, and then Decay and Floor sort of more of my style. And so like it is tough, and it is tough because everyone's doing different things, and you can see some people already know each other, and so that's also tough. And I don't know who it's tougher for. I don't know if it's tougher for the people who already know each other, or if it's tougher for the people who don't know each other, because if you're playing with somebody whose style you've seen a lot, maybe they're going to kill you, or maybe you're going to kill them first because it's risk. So I don't know.
Yeah. So in the beginning of the game, I kind of started with the QRS, which is like a random question stage. And in the chat, Epona Annie's bringing this up, who's from my forum. And like when I started that, that's kind of like a normal thing that I do in the forum. And then like the question of name the random scum team. Like it's kind of just a common question that's asked in my forum. But then like a lot of people, I kind of got a little bit of backlash for that. And then like I had no reason to explain why I did it. It was more just like it's kind of what I'm used to. That's kind of just what the culture of my forum is. And then I was able to kind of show posts where like it's been done normally by Talon, by Mafia, by everybody in that site. So that's kind of like the first things that I kind of got flack for. Like even though like I found the NIA, and I would find NIA in my forum. I think one of the biggest things that like first instance of culture clash was with Ash, kind of just like the way that he tested people. He voted by them really quickly. He just wanted to just put the pressure on them and just see what happens. That's not something that we're really used to, because in my form, you usually kind of vote when you're more serious about it. So when he started voting just to see what would happen, that was something that I wasn't really used to. But he kind of explained like what he got from it, and that to me kind of explained like more. It's like, okay, this is what he'd normally do. He's trying to do this from more a town perspective.
I mean,
so,
yeah. I mean, you say normally. At the same time, this was like my first.
Yeah, then I realized that.
Real game. I just saw Dizzy sheeping people in game 5, and I thought, oh, that looks like a fun strategy. Let's do that. So I'm just picking up bits of other people's play and throwing it in there and seeing how it works.
I do think some of the culture clash with I think Zen specifically on the kill all low posters thing. There's a little bit of that, but I think it actually contributed to the breakdown of Brad. I absolutely think they were planning on throwing the game no matter what happened, but I think this helped give them the excuse because we were talking about you were on the correct wagon and what that actually meant. And I think if we had not had that interaction, it would have been harder for them to lose it that quickly.
I think one of the interesting things about Culture Clash was who was newer to the game and newer to Culture Clash in general, and who wasn't really as accustomed to it, because there were 5 or 6 people in this game who this was their first time their community had sent anyone to champs. So that means that they didn't really have as much experience in Culture Clash in general. So that makes it even more difficult. Whereas say players like Daya and I who play on places like MU, where there's always a ton of Culture Clash to deal with, who are maybe a bit more accustomed to talking and playing with people with different mindsets and still being able to try and read them on basis of alignment versus they think differently or if they solve differently.
So one thing, and this is to everybody, but one thing I always approach when I play these games, especially if I'm good. If I'm bad, it's a little different. If I'm good, because I always want to see who is actually trying to solve the puzzle. I don't mean asking questions like, oh, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? That's not solving the puzzle. That's asking questions. I mean, who is actually pushing things forward? So like Ash, for example, day 2, like it's like, okay, I think he's wrong, but he's clearly a villager, right? Other people, I saw the same thing, which is like, they're pushing forward, trying to get things there when the game is grinding to a halt. Who's trying to spark things up and get moving again? And I always think that's a big giveaway for who's villager, regardless of anything else they're doing. And so I wonder if you guys look for those things, or if you guys look for the chat, like with the forum play. I don't mean this in a bad way. I just don't do it much. I don't know if you're looking through all the messages and trying to see who said something weird, or or what are you guys looking for when you go back through this long forum list?
What I usually do is I try to get into other players' mindsets. So, like for example, for you, Zen Blade, I was trying to get into your mindset of, okay, I'm this person who's just getting in, who usually plays IRL. I'm just getting into Forum Mafia. How is this consistent with like something a town Zen Blade just getting into Mafia? Is this like a towny way that you would approach and try and solve the game? So in a way, it is pretty similar to how you you said, like, how is this person actually trying to solve the game? So it's a bit more generalized in that you have to take into account like where is this person in particular from, and like what's their background essentially.
I would also agree. Yeah, sorry, Di. Go ahead.
Sorry. I tend to look at progression as well, like why they're voting the people that they're voting and how they get to that point. So, if you've been saying that Ara is a villager the whole game and you start suspecting Ara and there's not really a turning point for you within the thread, then that's more suspicious to me than if someone starts having a little bit of paranoia, talking about that paranoia, and then slowly getting to the point where they think Ara is a wolf. So progression helps me a lot, and then looking at, are they actually trying to solve, or are they asking questions that go nowhere? What are they doing with the information that's being presented to them? If they're asking questions, are they using that question to answer something for themselves and then apply it, or are they asking the question for no reason? So even if it's a question of someone else to try and get a read on them, I want to be able to see that in their progression.
Yeah, I have to agree with what Zen said earlier. Like, you could be posting a lot, you could be like asking a lot of questions, but if you ultimately don't go anywhere with it, then like, what are you doing? So I think like I usually look for a way of people solving the game, which I think is a good way to kind of rationalize culture clash. Like if people are approaching things in different ways, but like they're still trying to push the game in how they would probably normally do it, I think that makes more sense. Like with Zen, like I really couldn't rationalize Lynch, voting for the person who never voted at all. Like I just thought that they were inactive regardless of alignment. But I would get like in an IRL setting, like if you have somebody in the room that's not talking at all, like it's probably them. So like I could understand that, and like I could understand the reasoning that he was going towards. So and he was trying to solve the game in kind of his own unique way. So like that's what made me think of Town more than anything else.
This is a very interesting discussion. I love that we're actually finally having it in this way, because we've discussed reads in general, but I don't think we've quite put it this way. And I would also agree actually very much with you, Sen. But also to answer your question, because usually actually when I'm asked this question, when I talk about how I read people, I would say that I can, like a person can make 200 posts and I can have read them as scum for those posts, and they make one post and I flip my entire reader on 180. And that is certainly a trademark of my game and probably many other people's games. So I think for me, my version of it is, do I believe that they believe what they're saying? And it sort of relates to what you're saying. Are they actually solving? Do I believe they're solving? Or do I believe that they're feeling whatever they're expressing? Or do I believe that that is unfakeable, so to say? And I think it's way easier to read. My philosophy is it's easier, or it's only possible to clear someone for something that they would never say as wolf than the other way around, because I do think that there are so many false red herrings possible that I think it's very difficult to actually identify a true slip, because I think a true slip is actually what it takes to identify someone's mafia. So that's why I always believe in more so in finding townies than finding mafia myself, and then I work from a PoE basis. I also somewhat subscribe to what Dai is saying with regards to progression. I think I'm also subscribed to it as a valuable thing to look at. I don't base my read on someone's progression, because I've seen so many false or incorrect trains being started on people because they didn't explain that at some point the read jumped from A to B. And that is just something that townies don't always explain. Sometimes something changes in their head and they don't post it in the thread. So I think it's dangerous to be too reliant on something like that. So I would mostly look at whether I actually just believe it based on how they're posting, how they're defending themselves in regards to it. Not to say that that Dai doesn't necessarily do that, but I just think I more so look at it as a tool to question someone about, rather than base my read totally on it. I want to.
The progression thing's interesting because in real life settings, there's a lot of unspoken progression that happens. And so like it's just body language or you see stuff. And then in a forum setting, you would never see that. So, I get the idea of having to communicate much more clearly in a forum setting if somebody is doing like a progression read. Because in a real life setting like here, I can see if somebody's yawning and tired, if someone's disengaged, or if there's a weird vote happens or someone's like kind of like making eyes at somebody else secretly. There's a lot of hidden communication that can occur.
For sure. I also want to, because I thought of how to better phrase it so it makes more sense. My stance is there are things that only townies say, but there aren't things that only Mafia say. Is my belief. So that's why I believe.
Well, they're usually, this is how to discredit APOC.
I also want to note that we haven't heard that's not many. I want to note that we haven't heard a lot of hypes from Ara in a while. And I want to remind everyone in chat, for those who didn't join us from the very start of this podcast, that we have a bet going. If you are the one closest to guessing how many hypes Ara utters during this podcast, you will win a custom use title. This is dependent on someone actually counting it up.
I heard it's a very hype bet.
It's a very hype bet.
Yeah.
We have someone in chat asking, do any of you besides our King Daniel like Animal Crossing?
Yeah, actually, I do.
Yeah. Well, you like animals. So of course
true, but I also like Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
It's just a relaxing game, and it's a lot more popular now, so I'm glad that people are playing.
Yeah. I bought it for my wife as well, so I'm supporting the game. Yeah. I was told that it was Sims on crack. That's how I heard it described. And my wife loves Sims, so I thought that had to be the perfect gift. I don't have my wife anymore though, so I guess it came with a price. I'm kidding. I want to touch more on guys. Sorry if I cut the conversation. Because I want to continue talking about this. So I'll continue with the questions then, and you guys can also say if you have more thoughts on this. Because Zen, you originate from a live community, so I'm curious to know more about. And you aren't the only one this season, by the way. You're in the minority, but you aren't the only one. And we also have had people do quite well. And I say that because I haven't followed this game too much, I have to admit. So I can't actually comment on how well anyone played. I feel bad about that, but it's a lot to read all these games, and I feel bad for the jury that they have to. But I'm curious to know how you approached it, and was it fun? I guess we sort of it was the perfect first game. So let's just stick to what did you do to adapt?
I tried to just talk to people and get them to respond. Once I got into the game more and realized that there's this huge difference in play style, I was trying to get people to respond more in real time. Like, hey, I want to talk to you in real time. I don't want it because Ara would disappear and read stuff, or other people. They might be doing it, they might not. I have no idea. And so, since the Mafia can speak to each other while things are happening, there's all sorts of possible things, the bad guys could be doing. So I really wanted to see people talk in real time and look to see who was having problems doing that. For me, it's like a lot of reads are really important. So having that baseline and going from there. I didn't like the idea of you have to play this way to show you're good, or you have to play that way to show you're bad. That always is problems, and that's always a problem. And it's always a problem in real life too. You get a bunch of new people coming into your werewolf game, the meta is completely screwed up for the next hour or two until everybody gets on the same page. So it's the psychology though is the same. I think people tend to respond the same way based upon how frequently they've played. So I think that's sort of what I was trying to go towards.
Well, there are two interesting things there, and I agree. I'm not sure one of them is what you meant by it, but it is interesting that the thing that townies often do, a mistake they often do, is they very much project, or actually somewhat just say explicitly to other players how they want them to play if they are to perceive them as townie. That doesn't work very well if you're telling a Mafia what they have to do in order for you to read them down. That's not a very good strategy. That's not going to net you a lot of good results. But I'm also I'm very happy to hear someone shares my belief that live posting is very important, and that is to get people to, like, if you ask someone, the person is in threat right now, and to get them to write a lengthy, preferably post about something to get their true, off the top of their head thoughts. I think those are some of the best and most valuable posts to mine for information about their alignment. I certainly agree with that, rather than a prepared post.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I came in sort of expecting to play a more sit back and analyze sort of game, because I know I didn't end up coming across this way, but I'm a very structural thinker, and that was, I had spreadsheets all prepared and ready to go, but then I got in like, no, I want to be interacting with people in real time, and push them and see how they react, and just be weird at them and see what happens.
For sure.
I found that it was I had to sort of hold back a bit, because I'm usually used to posting a bit more than I usually post here, and with the 150 post limit, I feel like I found it would be a bit difficult to real time as much as I would have liked, but also I think my playstyle in general has sort of changed to be less interacty, I guess, and just more be there, poke people to say stuff when you're around, and like not be super real time, I guess. And I feel like that's one of the things that we all sort of had to adapt to. Like everyone sort of adapted a bit, where you sort of indulged other people when they wanted you to do stuff. Sometimes not everyone did, or you just sort of did other stuff that you weren't really that used to doing. And I think that's one of the really fun things about champs, where you just do other stuff, and sometimes you find it fun, sometimes you don't.
Yeah. And I'm always very impressed and happy to hear that people are willing to try new things. So when you said it, Ash, that you find things in other people's play styles and use some of it, I think that's...
I think it was, I saw in my vanity search after the game, I forget who it was who said it, might have been General Handkerchief, but he was like, Ash came in as a blank slate and we've made him into spec chatting incarnate. I thought that was probably appropriate.
Yeah. And actually, this going a bit back to role playing, I think there are only 5 to 10 communities this season that do role playing on their communities. Maybe a bit more. I'm not sure. There may be some that do it some of the time, not all the time. And I always feel it's a shame when those role playing communities have to, when their representative comes here, and they often stop role playing, or they don't role play because they see they're not fitting in that way. So it's interesting that we've had one person do it this season, and they aren't from a role-playing community, but that was the person who chose to stick with it, Cowboy Pringles, from one of the first games. So on that note, I just want to say that I want to organize a role-playing game for Mafia Championship players and their friends also. They're also welcome. But I want to organize a role-playing game so you can role-play like you used to, and like you love. Yeah. But yeah, where do the rest of you side on this in the moment play versus sitting back and analyzing? Is one style superior, or can the styles work together?
I mean, I do both. I thrive on interaction, but I'll also go back and do the ISOs because I want people to interact with me on the cases that I'm making. So if I make a case on someone, I usually ping several people, asking them what their thoughts are on it, or what they would do, are they reading it the same way I'm reading it, so that I can kind of get an idea of their thought process. And so that's important to me too, but I do think there's value to both. I don't think it's one or the other.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that and say that you sort of have to do both, and that I think it's more important that you can sort of adapt to both, or like being able to read both types of styles, because maybe if you prefer one style over the other, then yeah, you're going to do that more and probably be more effective at that too. But like if you're able to at least tolerate or play with other people who have different styles, then like that's more important than having one style be better than the other, because they're both hype play styles. It's just how you decide to play it. So
yeah. All right, we're nearing the end here. We're actually at 1 hour and 30 minutes, so I have 3 quick things that I want to get through. One is I have to give a shout out to Annie. I've been asked to by chat. So Annie, you are amazing and awesome, and you just keep being you, okay? And I have to show this. because I forgot. We have here the night one guesses from this game. No, that's not the right game. Where's here? Is this? No, that's. God damn it! 2 seconds. Where is it? I have it somewhere. Here.
Arrow right at the top of the list.
That's
There we go.
those are some fun guesses to see.
All right, let me just enlarge that. All right, these are the correct guesses. Era at the top as the most guest scum. There was a huge conspiracy theory in the chat suspecting Era. I don't know, was it pushed by Vox?
Well, yeah, so the thing is that Vox came pre-game, he decided, yep, I'm gonna tunnel Ara and I'm gonna make the entirety of Spec Chat start tunneling her as Mafia. But then the thing is that as he started tunneling me, he sort of started believing it and he couldn't get himself out of that mindset. So it was very funny watching that spiral go down.
and I don't know. I don't know if this was something you were intentional to try and lay low as a joke, but yeah, I for some reason I was just really having trouble. Something instinctive was making me feel really uneasy about you a lot of the game, and so yeah, I can see where a lot of that was coming from.
Might have been that, but I honestly didn't really hold back that much. It was mostly just, okay, I have to not try and soft PR because that gets you killed. And try and get the night kill, because, yeah.
Sorry for blocking Daniel. Apparently that was the popular move, blocking Daniel on the podcast. So yeah, we have the two handsome guys here in the middle. Can't block those. That's awful. But I just want to bring up that that if we had followed, or if the game had followed Spec Chat's reads, they would have won the game. So that's interesting. That's not very often that happens.
They're also very polarized, which is probably the most polarized we've seen.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. That is
because
yeah.
3 people got 0 guesses, which is that like never happens.
Yeah. And
I mean, it also isn't usual that like all 3 scum are in the lowest posters of the game. So
that too.
All right. I have one final thing I want to talk about before I let you guys go. Your favorite or funniest moment from the game. If you have any, of course. Anyone can feel free to take this.
For me, it has to be the scum slip on day 3. Ara argues it wasn't a slip.
It wasn't a slip.
It absolutely
definitely wasn't a slip.
He's saying, you've got too much information. You know things you shouldn't know. Like what? Well, you're saying I'm a wolf. What? That's a slip.
The action was a slip, but the post itself was not a slip.
It was, Shaq.
It totally was not a slip. He could have easily just waved it off. And
anyway.
You could have gone.
Yeah. Anyways, but the whole way it played out, with, you know, he says this and Fleur and me are like, wait, what do you mean? And he says something else and we're like, wait, what do you mean? And the way that it builds and the momentum that goes through over page 46 on that thread is just amazing. And it was just really, really cool to be in. And of course, I got carried away and thought, oh, Ara's stopped posting. So it went for the one time she stopped posting. But, it was a really exciting moment and it was a lot of fun.
I have one that's not related to the end of the game. So I thought on day 2 when we were getting towards the end and people, maybe it was Daniel, but somebody's like, what's the chances that Cruz is good or something? And I think, Decay's like 0% chance that he's bad.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, that's a weird answer, but I was like, but I kind of in there. And so I've been changed my answer. I was like 10% or something. And then it was funny because like most people were saying not likely, or maybe not most, but several people were saying not likely. But then a lot of the people just ended up voting for Cruz anyways. So even though I think, Daniel, I didn't think it was like hard anti-Cruz. Era in my mind wasn't hard anti-Cruz. And I wasn't, and we all just ended up voting to kill him anyways because the game was totally just like frozen. So I thought that was really funny. I just like, this is how villagers lose when we know we're doing something stupid and we just do it because we have to. So.
Very
I
true.
think Cruz's end of day was just really funny. Like on the day that he died, like he just started like posting like, "Oh, Townie mislynch in like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1." Like that was just really funny. And then he started posting like memes, and I think he posted like the Titanic of like the recorder song. Like that was just, he was just so funny about it. Like it was really entertaining just to go back and just like see everything he did. Also, but like before we leave, just shout out to everybody in like the chat from my community, just like being really weird and making me laugh this whole time.
Yeah. Daniel's having a lot of support. I also hear that Annie's having a stroke in the Beltree Mafia Discord. I just want to ask Annie, are you okay? Oh, I'm sorry, guys. All right. I don't know. Do the rest of you have any moments you want to share with us here as we are about to wrap up? We still have time for more if you. Yeah.
I think they covered it all.
Yeah.
I was actually like really ecstatic when Legend Dan flipped Jote. But that was a personal moment, not a.
No, I can understand, and I also I don't know if it was as simple for you because there were more thought into it from what you expressed, but I'm still a believer that people who roles are more likely to talk about their roles. So a cop is more likely to type the word cop in their post than a non-cop is. That is definitely a thing. I have researched it, and it's 100% a thing. So it's a good general read to use if you don't know what else to do.
I mean, I was semi-amused when after the game ended, and I saw that I had actually tracked / motion detected both of the Mafia who weren't carrying the Mafia KP, and Dia had carried it both nights. That was sort of amusing to see.
I mean, can you imagine putting a tracking action on the 0 poster on night 1? Like,
I mean, it was something I considered, but I actually went to look at one of Dia's old games as Mafia, and they didn't like carry the KP until night 5 or some late game. So I sort of just.
Hey, Ara, would you have considered going on cruise? Because I think if I was a Jote, I would have been really interested in going on cruise with the thought that if he was Mafia, he might carry out the kill.
I considered it, but I think I've ruled it out for reasons that I cannot remember at the moment.
I think if I hadn't carried the kill wouldn't have happened. It would have been randomized. I asked the others if they wanted to carry it out, and neither one of them like responded to me in time.
Yeah.
But that is the thing, right? The thing about if you have a Mafia 0 posting and then either they show up all of a sudden and they carry the kill or an action, or someone steps in and they carry the kill in action, is that really fair? That kind of sucks, right? But you do have the option to check them. Should you take away their ability to do so? Well, then you should also take away ability for town roles to use an action, I guess. And it's sort of complicated, but it's definitely not optimal, right?
I think Dia carrying the kill there was just a generally good idea because most people just don't use actions on 0 posters. It's like, it doesn't happen that often.
Yeah. All right, guys. I want to give you, because as Daniel did it, I don't actually think I've given people this opportunity before. So, and I of course want to give it. If you have anyone you want to shout out, as we're about to wrap up here, feel very free to take the opportunity to do so now. If you have any people you want to yell at or celebrate,
do a general shout out to Mafia Games Discord that I know at least Bun and Jason are in the chat. So, hi. Also,
shout out specifically to Holly because she was definitely the best partner I could have asked for, even as a sub. But also shout out to all the MU regulars because my game has gotten so much better because of them.
It's gone from okay to dyachei.
Yeah, sure.
That's a new level of good play. All right, yeah, these puns are getting worse as we go on. That's why we need to wrap this up. All right, so I want to say thanks again to you for joining me here on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. I hope to maybe see you on another podcast, but I definitely hope to continue these. throughout the season and also after season. And at least 2 people here minimum are moving on from this game, so that may be an opportunity for you to be on the podcast again. And if not, there'll be other opportunities and also other games and events and stuff on this podcast. Feel very free, everyone out. And thank you to everyone watching. This has been one of the more followed podcasts, perhaps the most followed one yet. I'm not actually sure. So that's very nice. It may be the
Crowds.
yeah.
My whole server is just in the chat.
Yeah, I think it may be due to Daniel. Yeah, I think Daniel's face brought out a lot of people. We need to have your face on more podcast, Daniel. So thanks to everyone for tuning in. Thanks for all the active chatting, all the support and love. We love to do this. I'll be back again next Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, same time as always.
Stay hyped.
Always stay hyped. Feel free to follow the channel so you'll get notifications when I'm online and doing stuff. And that is it. So thank you and peace out.